Right. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. All right, let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's session, From Theory to Practice, Navigating Your MDM Journey Across Implementation Styles. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Closed captioning is available. Simply hover over the virtual stage and click the CC button located at the bottom of your screen. We also encourage you to submit your questions leveraging the Q&A tab in the engagement panel on your right, and we'll do our best to answer questions at the end of the presentation. And if we're unable to get to your question, we'll follow up with you directly. We've also added some additional resources which are available in the Docs tab in the engagement panel on your right. There you can find some additional related content. And today's webinar will be available on demand after we wrap up. It will be sent to you via email directly. And lastly, as we head into the demo section of the program today, some of the content may be small or hard to read. To help with this, you can hover over the bottom right of your screen to maximize your window to full screen, or leverage the plus and minus icons to zoom in or out. Our esteemed speakers today are Tatiana Ladyjina, Director of Product Marketing, and Clint Richardson, Head of Data Product Management here at Tamr. Welcome to you both, and now over to you, Tatiana.
Thank you. Thank you, Kara. Hi, everyone, and welcome. And thank you so much for taking the time to join the webinar. As Kara mentioned, my name is Tatiana Ladyjina, and I'm Director of Product Marketing at Tamr. And I'm very much excited to be here today to have a conversation about MDM Journey and implementation with Clint Richardson, Tamr's Head of Products Management. Clint oversees product strategy and development and ensures alignment of Tamr's product with business objective as well as customer needs. He spent more than 8 years at Tamr in technical and leadership roles across data science, data ops, and engineering. He also holds a PhD in physics from Boston University, and rumor has it today he will bring in a few interesting parallels from the world of physics to help us think differently about master data management. Thank you for joining, Clint.
Thanks, Tatiana. Excited to be here and talk about this stuff with you.
Likewise. And so let's begin by just briefly talking about what it is that we will cover today. So today we'll talk about 4 kind of key things. So we'll start our conversation with a more of a business-oriented discussion about the building blocks of the MDM journey, kind of what you should keep in mind to make sure that your MDM project is a big success. And then we'll transition into more of a technical side of this conversation. We'll talk a little bit about the theory of MDM and different implementation styles, different use cases. And also we'll talk about what those implementations look in real life. And along the way, we will be sharing some customer examples and customer success stories. And then my favorite part, Clint will give us a quick demo showing the Tamr platform in action and how it can support different implementation use cases and implementation styles in one flexible platform. And as Kara mentioned, if you have any questions at any point, please make sure to drop those questions into the Q&A or chat panel, and our team will collect those questions and we will address them during the Q&A at the end. And so before we jump into the conversation, we would like to ask you a quick poll question. What is shaping your MDM decisions right now? And as Kara mentioned, in the engagement panel on the right of your screen, the poll question will appear. Please take a moment to submit your response, and we will share the results in a moment. And while the results are coming in, Clint, I have a question for you. So out of those, challenges and business goals that you see on your screen right now, which one or which ones come up more often in your conversations with customers or, prospective buyers? And also, kind of related to that, how often do you hear teams knowing that they need an MDM, but quite unsure kind of why, or said differently, what successful MDM project would look like for them?
Yeah, those are good questions. So, I think these 5 answers are what we selected for the potential answers because we see them a lot, right? We see lots of customers who don't trust their dashboards or don't know how to action records because of the quality inside of them. We obviously right now there's a strong mandate in a lot of places for AI initiatives, and those relying on good data to get started and not sort of feed the LLMs to go off the rails. And I think these tend to be some combination of like top-down initiatives versus bottom-up initiatives. And what we see a lot of is that the top-down initiatives have fewer details. So the executive makes a decision, we need to do this, and they kind of leave it up to their team to figure out what success actually looks like. And those can be very successful, especially when the culture can trust that team to go and understand success and implement it. But they can also run into a lot of slog where success isn't defined up front. They can spend too much time trying to define success before even getting started. And conversely, the bottom-up initiatives, they often have a clear definition of success because there's someone's pointing out a real problem inside of the organization that needs solving with better data. But those can hit slog when they don't tie to that larger strategy goals of the company. And so, there are pros and cons on both sides here. And that's a little bit of maybe an anticlimactic answer, but the point is that I think there's not a right way to start, but based on where things are coming from, you should either make sure that you have a relatively clear definition of success if it's coming from top-down side. That'll help you be more successful in MDM. Or if it's coming from your sales reps or your marketing leads don't know how to reach customers or prospects, it's a very bottom-up problem that hopefully can align with the top-line goal of growing revenue or increasing pipelines, something like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you, Clint. This is a very important context. And hopefully after today's webinar, people will be able to identify what success should look like for them. And so I think we are ready to show the results. Let me stop sharing my screen now for a moment. Okay, let's see. Interesting. Did you expect the results to turn out to be like they are?
I'm not surprised that there's a scattershot here. I mean, I think again, like everyone has unique problems, right? And so it's not surprising that some people want to get started with analytical, or some people say, hey, I have a problem I need to solve. And I think this goes back to what you want to talk about around the MDM journey and why we think of it as a journey and not a sort of start at the end and solve all the problems at once.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we are. Let me share my screen again so that we continue the conversation. Okay, I think it's on. Okay, perfect. So to your point, Clint, even this just one question, right, shows us that data challenges and business, needs and business goals vary from one organization to another. But what stays unchanged, or at least should stay unchanged, is that whatever this goal or challenge is, it should tie together all the elements of the MDM journey. And this kind of brings us back to the discussion around the building blocks of every MDM journey. Again, as I mentioned earlier, right, the business goal, whatever it is, maybe knowing your customers better, maybe onboarding your suppliers faster, or maybe minimizing operational risks and errors and inefficiencies, whatever the goal is, it should be basically front and center, right? It should tie together all the other elements that we will talk in more detail in a second, right? And as you can see on this slide, other building blocks or elements of an MDM journey are data readiness, organizational readiness, technological maturity, and basically automation, and AI-driven automation enabled by agentic workflows. And I want to be clear here and kind of, stop for a moment to emphasize that those building blocks or, steps are not necessarily sequential, right? It doesn't mean that you need to start at data readiness, for example, and then tackle the technological maturity. It is, of course, not the case for different organizations. The order of things might look different, but I think it is very important to keep all those building blocks in mind to make sure that your MDM journey or MDM project turns into a successful initiative. And now let's spend some time.
So Tatiana, if you had to, if considering these don't have to be sequential, but if you had to tell people which one's the most important one, where to get started, how would you help them make that decision?
This is a great question, and I'm afraid my answer is everyone's favorite. It depends, right? So it depends on where you as an organization start, what your circumstances are. So for example, it also depends on who is basically in charge of the MDM project. Let's say if I were just hired, to implement an MDM project and solve some business challenges, kind of using MDM as a means to solving them. Of course, I would probably start with organizational readiness, which is basically change management, right? Getting everyone on board, getting everyone buy-in, etc. At the same time, if I were with the company for many years, I know that, for example, our data is not in a good shape, I would probably start with data readiness. And then again, if my, annual bonus would be tied to bringing in some, AI optimization, I would probably start with, agentic workflow and AI-driven automation. So again, depending on your circumstance and where you start, you might want to put different weight or, different building blocks might be of different importance to you. But it is important to keep all four in mind. I hope this helps and answers your question.
Yeah, what I like about it is it reminds me of that quote by, I think, Peter Drucker of culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think, the advice is kind of look at the culture of your organization and your initiatives to that and make sure they're aligned or you won't be successful. Makes sense.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so let's talk a little bit more about the data readiness. And when I say data readiness, what I mean is basically making sure that your data is in the state that basically can support the outcomes you want, right? Again, depending on your outcomes, it could be better customer experiences or whatever it is. You just want to make sure that the data you're using for this purpose is ready and available. And in order to ensure that, we believe there are certain steps you might want to take, starting with, of course, assessing where you are, what's your starting point. For example, do I have so many duplicates within a system or maybe across different systems? Maybe, when I look at my data, I see that many of the important attributes are missing, or, there are many, there can be so many different challenges that a given organization can have when it comes to data quality, and understanding what those are is crucial to be able to resolve those challenges along the way. And then once you understand what your starting point is, you can finally start improving the quality of your data to, what I kind of bringing back what I mentioned earlier. So for example, you realize that many of the very important attributes are missing or incorrect. So maybe, bringing in some trusted external data would help, right? So basically enriching your data might help. Or maybe you have lots of duplicates in your system. And so, finding the kind of tackling the entity resolution part of this process might help you with, right, the duplication, et cetera. So again, depending on what your starting point is, it will kind of determine what the improvement steps would look like for you. And then once you start improving, you need to make sure that you collect feedback on this improved data from the people who actually use this data, the end users. We see it oftentimes, but I think it is kind of changing, and has been changing in the last few years. It happens so that data is often owned and kind of managed by data teams. But the reality is that data teams do not really use it on a daily basis. Sales, marketing, finance, analytics, all the other teams are using this data. And so when you improve your data, you want to make sure that those changes and improvements truly make data more valuable, trusted, and consumable by, for those other teams. And so taking a moment to let them review this data and collect their feedback is crucial. And then when your data is finally, is at much better state, maybe not ideal, right? Because nothing is ever ideal, but, is in much better state. It should be ready for whatever use case you have in mind. It could be analytical use case, it could be operational use case, it could be some AI related, AI initiatives related use case. So whatever it is, that once the data is ready, you can start using it.
What I like about that answer is that there's sort of at each step the data gets a little bit better, and I think that plays nicely with this idea. It doesn't have to be a monolithic journey. That there are steps, and each step can deliver value. I think that aligns a lot with what people talk about being agile, how you do data or data ops, stuff like that. So it's a nice aspect of the answer that I wanted to call out.
Yes, exactly. Data is not static, right? It's dynamic. It's being created and used and updated on a daily basis. And so it should never be treated as kind of, one cleanup project, if you will, right? It's a continuous process where you'll, go back and forth and, maybe tackle different data domains at a time, or maybe the exposure and what attributes you're working on, et cetera. So it's kind of an ongoing process of making your data better. Yeah. And so the second kind of business-oriented business block of an MDM journey is organizational readiness. And this basically has to do with, as I mentioned, alignment, change management, and then planning and execution. So as we mentioned a few times today, right, the first thing that you need to kind of get done is to understand what the business goal is, kind of the overarching business goal is, and then make sure everyone agrees with that, right? So everyone is aligned on what is the kind of final destination for this journey is. And then once you have it kind of outlined, and I also think it's very important that once you have this goal, it should be kind of defined so well that everyone understand what it means, you know what I mean? So that there's no kind of second reading of it. And so when this happens, you need to make sure that people across the organization are, you need to get their buy-in, right? Because as I mentioned before, like data is being created and used on a daily basis. And oftentimes those MDM initiatives would require people's engagement and input from, people across the organization, not just the data team. And then once you have kind of everyone is on board, everyone is excited, right? And you have the kind of big idea in mind, you need to kind of break it down into smaller pieces, more digestible pieces. Coming back to the example I gave earlier, maybe you can start with just one domain, let's say customers or healthcare providers or vendors, depending, I don't know what, right? But what is the most important data domain it is for you and for your organization. And then once you tackle this domain, right, you can expand into adjacent. With the customer example, it could be invoices, products, you name it, right? But just tackling one domain at a time can help you, not boil the ocean and not try to master and improve the entirety of your organization's data, which is, a recipe for failure, right? You can start small, move quickly, and show the results, the first results, to keep people engaged and excited about this initiative. And last but not least, no matter how great and reasonable and logical your business goal is, no matter how great your plan is, it is important to stay open-minded, because guess what? Things change, people leave, markets, shift, and technology changes, life happens. And so you need to make sure that there is a room kind of for adjustment, right? And you just, again, need to keep it in mind. And also when you're selecting a technology partner for your MDM journey, you need to make sure that they are also flexible enough to adjust to those changes and, changes in business goals and demands, without having you start over, every time.
And that's a good, I think, segue talking into the question I have for you about the slide, which is, how do you do it in smaller ways? How can we help people know how to sort of make progress here without having to feel like they have, alignment everywhere across the business? How can they get started with the smallest step possible on this type of journey?
So again, that's a great question that can be hard to answer. But if I were to make this call, I would definitely start small by identifying the data that makes, the most impact, kind of the 80-20 rule. I'm sure that if you were like to master, say, was your customer data, right? The impact on your organization, every aspect of your organization will be significant versus if you were to start with, I don't know, something that's not used or brought up on a daily basis, right? And then starting smaller allows you to test all the theories, to stay agile, right? Because as you start working on one domain, as you start working on improving the data, within a single domain, or maybe not domain, maybe just, set of systems, not your data ecosystem in its entirety. But when you start small, it allows you to test your theories. It allows you to improve the processes and kind of, test your hypothesis, right, about how it should be done. Yes, you will probably, make mistakes, but that's exactly what's necessary, right, to get to the success at the end of the day. And so once you've shown the progress was the smaller part of your bigger picture, people will get just more excited, to move on and to continue working on it. Because, if people, if you, let's say, set up the bar so high that it's impossible to reach, people get just, demotivated, and nothing is going to get done, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think what you're saying is sort of organizational readiness. Really, that last item is kind of the most important, where people are going to have an open mind to, like, let's solve some problem and then see, and maybe it's a success, and maybe it's not as much success as we want, but how do we keep going?
Yeah, exactly. And so we kind of talked a little bit, right, about the business-oriented building blocks of an MDM journey. The next question, right, is, okay, that all sounds good, but how do you actually implement it? All right. And so this kind of brings us to the more technical side of this conversation, more technical building. But before we jump into those, we would like to ask you one more question, right? Which MDM use case best describes where you are today? And I'm actually, now I realize that I think we've already asked this question. No, we have.
We have the slides out of order of the poll questions, but I think we have.
Okay. There was first. Okay, but you know what? We now have the results, so we know the results. We know that it's white. That the answers are spread across analytical, operational, and hybrid. So I guess that in this case we can just move on to the next.
I can see if folks answered this second question.
Okay.
Responses up from the first slide, and I'm interested to see. So I think, so if you stop sharing, we can pull up the results and see what's actually driving MDM initiatives at customers. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of data quality and trust. No AI initiatives. That's interesting. I think that's a nice segue to a point I wanted to make on this poll, and going back to, like, where you get started. My advice for everyone who's listening to this is try to solve someone else's problem. And so not your problem, go solve someone else's problem. And the reason is actually this trust issue. We see a lot of MDM initiatives start because they try to solve their own problem, or even just improve analytics, and they do it in a way that creates friction in enterprise. So, for example, you can imagine there are a bunch of sales leaders in your company, incentivized to have a large number of customers, and if you show up with a dashboard that says, well, guys, you thought we had 2 million customers, but actually we did this great project, and it turns out we only have 1 million customers, that meaningfully affects their livelihood, right? And so they're going to react to that poorly. And but if instead you work to solve their problem of, hey, what is challenging sales right now, or what's driving their costs from suppliers or inventory purchasing, you start to get more of that organizational readiness that you talked about earlier, Tatiana, and it lets you, I think, get to a state where even if you still have that duplication problem, if you can use technology, like this is a place where Tamr orients heavily around the data always getting better. That's what Curator Hub is all about. where you can have that trend line of improvement and start removing the duplicates over time, and get to the place of, okay, we all agree on, it's only 1.5 million customers. You can do that in the same time frame as long as you have that good trend line, as you would of having to have the big fight about, hey, how many customers do we actually have? I have this tool that says 1.5 million. You have a Salesforce that says 2 million, and not waste time arguing, but instead spend your energy on making sure that data is always improving. And again, going back to solving someone else's problem, that naturally engenders trust across the enterprise. So interesting to see trust as the number one vocator here.
Yeah. I think we are ready to start sharing again. So just a second. Okay, and I think, again, this is a good segue to more of a technical side of this conversation, right? We know that different organizations have different challenges, objectives, but also different technological maturity, different objectives, different constraints. And so I think a couple things would be helpful, Clint, if you could translate engineering into English for me and the audience, right? And talk more about the different implementation styles, kind of in theory, but also if you could give, some examples of how those things work in real time, real life.
Yeah, sure, definitely. Let's jump in. And this slide, I wanted to start with it and put it here because I think anyone who's in the MDM space looking up things will encounter some blog posts about the 4 different MDM styles: registry, consolidation, centralized, and coexistence. And certainly, we're going to be at Gartner in a few weeks, and Gartner, also talks about these 4 styles of MDM. So just to say sort of quickly what they are. Registry MDM is where you have multiple different source systems, and the real goal is to create an ID registry so that if I have a Salesforce ID or a HubSpot ID, how those 2 IDs relate to each other. So who are the same customers across those 2 different systems, or multiple Salesforces or multiple HubSpots. Just knowing how those primary keys map to each other. So again, you're using your MDM platform to just link these records. Consolidation takes the next sort of obvious step and says, well, if I have these 2 views of my customer, how do I put them together to have one trusted view? So consolidating your sources into a single record. And a golden record is how we normally refer to it. And then central MDM sort of says, hey, well, I have golden records. I only want golden records to happen in one place. I only want people to be able to author or create records in one system. And I want everyone else to subscribe to that. So there's one source of truth. We'll call it a system of record parlance. You'll also see that in industry. And it basically means, hey, these are my customers, and everyone else, you don't have all the other systems, you don't have an opinion here. You're just reading from that central repository. And then coexistence is it's the most challenging implementation style, but it can be very useful where you need to allow authoring in multiple systems. So, for example, you don't want to tell your sales reps, hey, you can't onboard you can't create an account or a lead in Salesforce, or you have customer onboarding boards where they can onboard themselves. And what Coexistence MDM is designed to do is to allow those records to come into the system, but then keep all of the other systems in sync. And typically this means like eventual consistency because most systems are polling-based systems. And what I'm excited to show later in Tamr is how the fact that our platform is an event-driven platform means that you can get to this in real time without needing to worry about some of these messy sort of state management questions.
And as I look at this, the different implementation styles and how they relate to different use cases, it kind of all makes sense, but it makes me wonder, like in real life, does it ever happen that, an organization fits in one bucket or, box perfectly, or is it more of a, a combination, a little bit of everything?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's a nice segue to talk about some of our actual customers. And in particular, a healthcare staffing company, which came to us years ago. They were a customer for a long time. And the thing about healthcare providers is There's about 7 million of them in the US. We kind of know that answer because that's how many MPIs there are. MPES has its own data quality issues, but you kind of know the answer. And so when they came to us and said, well, we know the answer is around 7.5 million, but we have 10 million records. The first problem is pretty obvious, right? How do you go and map those records together? How do you deduplicate them to get a more trusted view? And then after that, they took it to the next step and said, okay, well, we're going to now use this to help onboard new providers. So if a provider is looking for a job, they can come to a portal and onboard. And this customer basically wants to be able to make sure that they can look them up in that 7.5 million records and not create, get back to the 10 million over time. And so they're leveraging us operationally in almost a sort of real-time consolidation pattern where they have multiple authoring systems that then come into Tamr and create a single golden record. So it's sort of a consolidation pattern. But then Tamr is almost a gatekeeper for other systems in the org, where they do analytics or other permissioning of mapping to job posts, all sorts of things. And so from that side of the org, it's kind of central MD because for all of those systems, there is a single authoring point, and it's Tamr. And that's, I think, to your point, so this sort of nice example where you can use parts of these patterns to solve different problems, and you don't have to use the same pattern across every system in your enterprise. You just have to be thoughtful about how you stitch them together to solve their problem.
Yeah, and I think this is also a great reminder that your business goals and needs change, right? So you don't need to kind of marry to this one single implementation deployment style right now. So maybe it is the best approach as of now, right? But then change. And again, you need to have this flexibility to make adjustments without starting, everything again from like a white piece of paper. So thank you. This is a great example. And then I know I actually wanted to talk about a couple more customer examples, but in the interest of time, I recommend us moving on to the fun part.
Yeah,
the other examples of MDM in real life, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Let's keep going. Starting though with MDM and B2B, and this is just a useful way to frame a few of the points I'm going to try to make later. The golden records are the goal of MDM. It's to give you the data that you can trust and run your business on. And golden records, they contain different types of attributes that play some role in entity resolution, data quality importance, or sort of fit for useness. And they contribute differently depending on your use case. But you have things like names, addresses, contact info, LinkedIn URL, emails, website, etc., and identifiers. And if you look at this golden record on the right is Science Applications International Corporation. One point I want to make is there are different tools that specialize at different parts of this golden record. So for example, if you're a Tamr customer, you'll get Google address enrichment because Google Maps tends to be very good at addresses. You'll also get Glyph for company names, alternative names, or LEI, key identifier. And if you have a DMB API key, you can plug that into Tamr and you'll get DUNS numbers inside of your golden record as well. And the reason I'm going through that is, I think we see this in real life that there are different groups, or sometimes there's literally groups of stewards or different enrichment services that are better at handling different parts of the golden record. But we have to use them to come all together to create a single view. And with that, let's flip to a slightly different topic, which is from my background, which is MDM at CERN, at the Large Hadron Collider. And I wanted to talk about this because I spent a lot of time thinking about kind of the parallels of data management in physics and in the enterprise in joining Tamr 8 years ago. and spending a lot of time working with customers here and having just come off of sort of managing these large physics data sets. And what's interesting to me about it is, particle physics has golden records too, but they look like this. And so what this is a picture of what happens when protons collide and sort of explode into lots of different particles inside of the CMS experiment that we worked on. And you're happy to go into detail here. You'll probably have to stop me, Tatiana, pull me out. But the yellow lines are charged particles flying out from this explosion. Things like electrons. The green lines, or those big rectangles coming out from the middle, are where photons came out. And then the blue, sort of chunkier rectangles, if you can see them, are quarks, or sometimes they're referred to as jets. And what's exciting about this is, it is a way for physicists to identify candidate events from a potential Higgs boson decay. So Higgs decaying to 2 photons happens to be a really clean signature for identifying it. And this is from one of the Higgs discovery papers, this event. And so addresses, identifiers, and names, physics has things like electrons, quarks, or photons. But if you go to the next slide, talking about how we get there is there's a federated feedback model, which again is a very typical pattern that we see in enterprise. There are dedicated groups, they have to be called POGs, physics object groups, which work on resolving each particle type. So again, it's this federated data stewardship where there are certain people who are curating essentially the electron data or curating the photon data. And then all of these inputs are fed into a global reconstruction algorithm to produce the final golden record, the final event display that we see there. And that's just survivorship rules by another name. And so then if you squint a little bit and you look at this picture and you say, okay, I have data from multiple different sources coming in together to produce a single event, that's really just consolidation MDM. And the point that I want to make here is not that there's something sort of, oh, it's cool that physics does MDM too. The point is that data management techniques, really the patterns are some sort of universal. And to keep talking about that, yes, I'll make another example. This is a topic on which I'm definitely not an expert, but if you look at the Sumerian civilization from 4,000 years ago, they were a civilization. They had data problems, and they solved those problems by writing down transactions and Ur-Amma acknowledging getting beer on clay tablets. And I don't know if they intended to do this, but it's nice that they wrote it on clay, because every time the cities burned down, the clay baked, and then the tablets stayed around for a long time, like firing something in a kiln. But the point is that the way they structured this, they had dedicated places, write things on tablets, and those people had the job to author these records about what was happening. And then they used those records to solve things like property disputes or aggregate them into economic summaries. And so that's really just a hybrid use case of central MDM, where they have a central authoring place, and then they use that to do things like analytics of what's happening in the economy or operational property disputes. And I pick these 2 examples because they're, one, I think, physics background has always been interesting to me, but 2, they're 4,000 years apart. And over those 4,000 years, the patterns of managing data haven't changed that much. But what has changed a lot is the technology for managing it. And the technology changing gives us this ability to have new processes and get really new outcomes and learn new things. And that's the takeaway that if you go to the next slide, you can say, well, Clint, you just told me there's kind of nothing new under the sun, so why are we even talking about this? And the point is that there are new things under the sun. It's the things that are new are your problems. So we had in the physics and CMS experiment at CERN, we had a wildly different problem set than Ur-Amma, who needed to acknowledge receipt of beer. Now, you still get receipts if you go buy beer, but the point is that the problems changed, and also the technology changed and let us solve those problems. And that's also what's going on in the MDM space, is that we have new and better technology that can help solve problems in new and better ways. And there's a very easy analogy to talk to about software engineering and everything that's going on with coding agents, where software engineering best practices, like the coding patterns and test-driven development, stuff like that, that hasn't changed in the last decade. It's not like suddenly we realized that stuff was not important. It's just that we have a new tool to do that faster and in different ways, and hooking up agents to Jira and auto-generating plans and handing it off to something else and having or the GitHub Copilot or reviewing your PRs. It's not that reviewing code is suddenly no longer important. It's just that there's a new way to do it faster. And with AI native MDM, we can have similar differentiated outcomes on your data. And so that's what we're so excited about building Tamr, is that it is AI native MDM on this modern platform that lets you have differentiated experiences like real-time entity resolution agents, so that you can prevent duplicates and proactively flag any data quality issues like potential duplicates that are kind of on that decision boundary. You can have asynchronous event-driven reactions to your data. So from simple things like someone wrote a messy address and then can automatically clean it for you in real time, to more advanced, hey, a new customer came in, but they share contact information with these other customers. Let me create a household out of that bundle of records for you. And then lastly, to enable this, bring your own agent architecture, where you can really embed your MDM platform in your business process as you're trying to do these more advanced AI workflows. And I think no one voted for AI as a reason to MDM and voted all on the trust, but I think the trust part is the prerequisite to getting to that later on, sort of more agentic workflows, which on the next slide we have as sort of
and I should have voted for AI, because I do hear that a lot when I have conversations with customers and prospects. But I felt like it was cheap.
I hear it a lot too, but I guess we should have voted. So anyway, the point being that we know there's a lot of buzz about getting to these agentic workflows, but I'm actually really excited that everyone who voted said trust is the first issue, because these workflows will just fail if you don't have trust in the data anyway. That's good. So now I know we.
Yes, I think it's time to
put some time.
Yes, it's time to show it all in action and jump into demo. So I can stop sharing for a second.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, as you were sharing this example about ancient clay tablets, kind of automated, like if, let's say now we can notify people if a potential duplicate is entered into a system. Can you imagine, like, if you start to write something on a clay, and if it's a duplicate, it just, I don't know, it just cracks, right, in real time. So that would be also helpful to have. But
yeah, totally. We're writing on our iPads anyway. So my goal in this demo is to just show in our product what it kind of means to do these implementation styles. So hopefully we can move relatively quickly. I'll start here with a golden record, and it's the goal. So you can see this record for Starbucks in Dallas, Texas. It's a coffee shop, has a phone number and a website. And the thing about how we got here was, if we scroll down, we can see we put together 8 source records across 4 different sources. And these source records are available to export as well. You can see they have some variation in company name and address. And so Tamr automatically resolve these as the same entity and create a gold record from them. And that's a way in which we're giving you both registry and consolidation out of the box for both the source records just tied together with this Tamr ID, or you can export the golden records themselves, whichever is most useful for you. You kind of get both for free to get started. And then to talk about this registry ID graph or ID registry, I'm going to point out one feature of Tamr that I'm really excited about, which is what we call ID swizzling, which is basically we're going to walk the registry for you. So if I copy this source ID, and then I come back over here to my search page, I'm going to search by an ID here, and I'm actually going to search by that source ID. And what you can see it's doing is it's walking this ID chain in real time and pointing me to the golden record ID inside of Tamr. And why that? Yeah,
sure. Right. You said correctly, right? So basically, ID swizzling allows you to assign a unifying Tamr ID for your golden record without changing the source records, right? So the source IDs stay unchanged, right? Okay.
That's right. And what's especially exciting about that sort of putting that ID in the search bar and getting rerouted here is that means that your source systems can just query by their IDs. So if you have a Salesforce hooked up to Tamr, you don't need to go put the Tamr ID into Salesforce. Of course, we love Tamr IDs being everywhere. You can, but a Salesforce integration can just ask Tamr about records using the Salesforce ID. And because we have this live ID registry, we'll always walk it for you and point you to the right record. So it's a way that makes registry really easy to get started with and start pulling that data back to your source systems in a non sort of destructive way.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna switch over and introduce a couple other tools. So one of them is this app. This is a pretend CRM app that we use for demos. You can think of it like a Salesforce. And the other is a Salesforce. And so I'm going to create a new contact in Salesforce. If you've ever watched Tamr demo before, you've probably seen her before. Her name is Diane Arney. She's not a real person. And I'm going to save Diane Arney, Salesforce. I told you don't have to go get the Tamr 360, right? You don't have to go pull that. But if we refresh the page, we'll see that one has existed because we have this operational connection. And so this is a way in which I can enable people to create records in Salesforce, then have them automatically hooked up to Tamr. I can go look at the record inside of Tamr, and I can see that I have Diane Arney, I have her email, but I don't really know anything else about her. Now, to support these coexistence patterns where you want authoring in multiple different systems, I'm going to come over to this CRM application and I'm going to onboard Diane again. So maybe this is my marketing platform. Maybe she registered for a webinar and we got her contact information. So we're going to bring her into the system. And what's nice about this version of Diane Arney is that we have her name, her email, but also her company name, her phone number, her address. And so when we go ahead and create the contact, this this application is tied to Tamr and says, hey, we found this existing contact for you. And we just go ahead and update the record. So now coming back over here to Tamr, behind the scenes, you can see that Diane Arney is the same Diane Arney, but she has an address and a phone number now. And what's especially exciting, though, is if we come over to Salesforce and we refresh Salesforce, we'll see that the phone number made it to Salesforce as well. And so this is just a very sort of concrete example of what coexistence MDM means and how you can manage it effectively with Tamr, that these changes are flowing across different systems and Tamr is acting as a hub to put them where they need to go. And I skipped central MDM for time, but I think the coexistence pattern shows sort of the important parts of central as well, where you can create a record in Tamr and it's immediately available with the API. It's the same as if you create a record in Salesforce and it goes to Tamr, then it's immediately available for that other CRM application to know about.
Perfect. Thank you, Clint.
Yeah.
Start also sharing my slides again. And so I know we only have like 10 minutes late. So any last words of wisdom before we move into Q&A? I'm sure everyone has lots of questions.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first one is something I think is really important to keep in mind. I know I talked about technology enabling different outcomes, and that's true. But it's also true that MDM is fundamentally a data problem, and it's why I think everyone voted for a combination of operational data issues and data trust, is because the problem you're trying to solve is a data problem. And for the outcome to work, our advice is always tie it to business problem and find what data you need to solve that business problem. So another customer example I think didn't talk about is leveraging, is a customer that's leveraging real-time APIs to, as soon as a record is created, we'll go and enrich it with D&B information, and that helps them decision what to do with that record in real time. So for them, the data they need to solve the problem was a DUNS number. So we said, great, every time a record is created in Tamr, we'll immediately go get the DUNS number for you so that you can action that record correspondingly. And then the last point, we talked about the implementation styles. It's always good to know the patterns that are available, but don't be shy about mixing and matching to support your MDM journey. And always choose a platform that lets you evolve over time. And that gets to the last point to be clear is that as you're doing this with Tamr, you can just sort of turn on additional parts of the platform, and you don't have to re-implement anything. You have the persistent Tamr IDs throughout this entire lifecycle of your data product.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was a very insightful conversation grounded in many real-life examples, and examples beyond traditional MDM use cases. And so with that, Karen, the floor is yours, so we can move on to the Q&A.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. Before we dive into Q&A, I just want to cover a few quick announcements. So we are heading to Gartner Data and Analytics Summit next month, March 9th through the 11th in Orlando. If you are going to be there, we'd love to see you. You can find Tamr at our engagement zone number 5 and booth number 927 in the exhibit hall, where we'll be hosting an interactive MDM game and giving away some great prizes. We'll also be taking the stage on Wednesday that week alongside Luke Mellers from CNA Canada, so be sure to check that out. And if you'd like to learn more about Tamr and our AI native MDM solution, you can demo with our team and download our newly updated MDM Journey ebook for a deeper look at how we help organizations modernize master data management. So we do have a couple minutes left, so let's shift into a live Q&A. If you do have questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A box on your screen. First question, we'll try to get through as many as we can. Is your definition of a MDM process inclusive of data warehouses, data products, and data vaults, or is this MDM term more general?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when we're talking about MDM, we're really talking about sort of the tenets of how you manage your data, right? How you do the master data management part of the problem. Now, a master data management initiative will often involve an MDM platform. So we would say Tamr. The way you implement MDM can touch lots of different things. So our offering is a data product focused offering, so that you have sort of fit for use solutions out of the box. That MDM project, though, will also touch many other parts of your IT infrastructure. So things like data warehouses or data vaults, like that, those will be part of it. But when we're talking about MDM, we're really talking about the sort of technology and process and data that you need for creating those central repositories of gold records.
Great. Second question, how would Tamr differentiate when the contact has changed company? For example, would it keep trying to link to the old record address?
Yeah, this is what I like about this question is we had this exact same question years ago when we started using Tamr internally. And the answer is it's actually a really very reasonable business question of what do you want to have happen? Do you want to configure the model to link and sort of extend the employment history of someone, which is useful when you want to know things like, hey, my champion has moved from company A to company B, I should go market to company B. Or do you want to keep them separate to have these multiple different views? So the short answer is configurable, and it actually really ties to what your business goal is and what you're doing with your contacts data.
Thank you. Last question. How do you integrate IT systems with MDM? How is data overwritten when there are duplicates, and do external IT systems need to be modified?
Yeah, so I think the points we tried to talk about a little bit throughout this are there are different ways to do this, right? Depending on the IT system involved, if you're integrating with Databricks or Snowflake, you might be doing something like a medallion architecture where your sort of raw sources are coming into Tamr and then we're pushing to a golden layer. If you have that more operational connection, you can choose to do things like go and merge records inside of Salesforce when Tamr identifies duplicates, or you can do less invasive of just put the Tamr ID on every record in Salesforce so that you have a view of what's duplicates. So why I'm going through these lists of choices is that change is hard to react to, especially when you're doing more operational use cases. When you change the data that your business is running on, that affects people's daily lives and jobs. And so it's what we try to come to market with is a set of tools to let you manage and sort of titrate that change where it makes sense. So for analytics use cases, it's typically like, oh, good, we have better data, let's do better analytics. But for ones, you can, of course, go and re-ingest Tamr and overwrite everything in your CRM system. But that's a big change. We'll work with the organization to make sure everyone's ready for it. Or you can do these slower changes that happen over time. Again, just focusing on the trend line of data.
Awesome. And sorry, we are going to do one more question that just came through. How much data modeling capabilities are in Tamr? Is it just a flat list of record types or more hierarchical? If I said that right.
Yeah, so Tamr supports both lists and structs for attributes on records, but we also support relationships across records. So we didn't talk about it much today, but we have the ability to link records using our relationships API, or there's a UI for it as well inside the 3CC page. And so you can do, I think, both hierarchies via our relationships, but also you can have a relatively not free form, but you can have a robust, let's say, data model to support whatever kind of data you need to bring in.
Awesome. Right on time. So thank you both for joining us today, and we hope you all found the session valuable at home. Just a quick reminder, today's webinar will be available on demand. We'll send out a link so you can rewatch it or share with your colleagues. And before you go, we'd love your feedback. I'm going to launch a quick survey. It should be available to you in the right-hand engagement panel. It should only take a minute or two, but it really helps us continue to improve and bring you the content that you want to see. So thanks again for spending part of your day with us, and we hope to see you at a future event soon. And thank you again, Tatiana and Clint.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Karen.